Part 68. The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 673. Although Mu Yangling lived a new life, he still didn't believe in such mysterious and illusory things, but he was in awe of ghosts and gods a lot. Mu Yangling thought for a while and said, I don't need to drink this talisman. After a while, I will take the little bear to worship in various temples. If the child's development is slow, then wait for him to grow up slowly. Praying to God and worshipping Buddha is just asking for peace of mind. Mu Yangling put the little bear on the couch, nodded his nose and said, My dear son, we are not in a hurry, we will wait for you slowly, okay. Little Xiong was sweating profusely building the wood. He didn't have the mind to pay attention to his mother, and just nodded perfunctorily when he heard the words. In Chi Heiran's eyes, he thought his son was really cute. In Chi Heiran's eyes, his son is naturally good everywhere, so he really wanted to detain the two pediatric masters and let them stay in Canaan to serve his son, but thinking that Xiaobeo's health is not good, to hospital the good two pediatricians came to him, so what if Xiaobeo has a headache? So even though he was reluctant to give up, Chi Heiran waved the two imperial doctors back when the servants who came to announce the decree set off. As soon as they left, there was a message from Bisha Miao village that their deal with Dali was set on the 8th day of April, so they would start their journey in 2 days. Chi Heiran asked Mu Yangling to pack up his things, and said, just say that I went out to inspect the border defense, and I also need to see the training situation of the guards. I can't come back for a month or two. I have made arrangements in the army. Jin and Mr. Qian, no one knows that the soldier talisman is in your hands, so you should be more careful. Mu Yangling nodded, be careful too, if something goes wrong, come back quickly. Chi Heiran nodded, went to hug the cub again, and then left. As soon as Chi Heiran left, Mu Yangling thanked the guests behind closed doors. In the eyes of outsiders, the news of the prince's inspection of the border defense was further confirmed. All kinds of news flew to the border guards. The boss is coming to inspect. And Mu Yangling thanked the guests behind closed doors because the Xioxia family was happy. As soon as Chi Heiran walked away, Mu Yangling thought of going to the field to have a look. Now that the spring planting is over, she wants to see the growth of the crops. After all, it is the first time people here are planting corn and upland rice. Number 1. But before she had time to go out, a nun rushed over from the corner door next door, and said cheerfully, Your Majesty, our wife is very happy, please go and have a look. Mu Yangling didn't realize what ecstasy was for a while, and seeing the wrinkle on the woman's face was crowded together with a smile, she said with happiness in her heart, pregnant. Yes, yes, the mother-in-law clapped her hands and said, our wife has been feeling sleepy for the past few days, and she was still a little acidic this morning. Madame Xia felt something was wrong, so she asked the doctor to take a look, and the doctor said that she was happy. Mu Yangling was overjoyed and said, this is good news, did your master know? The mother-in-law smiled all over her face, I haven't had time to inform the Duke. It's not that Madame vomited so badly that she couldn't eat anything, so she came to ask the Empress to find a way. Mu Yangling immediately turned his head to Li Shun and said, quickly ask Imperial Physician Wang to go to the Duke's mansion. Turning around, he picked up Xiao Xiong and went through the corner gate to see Xioxia. Xiao Xia did vomit badly, she was lying on the couch with a pale complexion, almost holding a spittoon to spit, but the people in the room were all beaming, which shows how much enthusiasm she has for Xiao Xia's pregnancy. Only Mother Xia was happy and worried at the same time, why are you vomiting so hard? Mu Yangling also felt that he vomited too much, so he couldn't eat anything, so how could he protect his pregnancy? She patted Xiao Xia's back, and said, Physician Wang is here, let him show you. Xiao Xia gratefully said, thank you, Aling, if you hadn't taught me, I wouldn't have known when I would have conceived. Xiao Xia rubbed her belly and said in a low voice, this child was born that day. His face was flushed red, and he lowered his head after saying only one sentence. Mu Yangling didn't expect to be so accurate, but she hit it the first time. She whispered, "The days are still young, you have to be careful. When I was pregnant, Wang Ma was waiting for you. Do you want me to borrow it from you? How many days?" Xiao Xia hesitated. Nurse Xia also gave birth to a child. Mu Yangling patted her hand and said with a smile, "You can make up your own mind. Let the imperial doctor prescribe a prescription for you later. It's not a solution to keep throwing up like this. Be careful to spoil your stomach." Xiao Xia nodded. Madame Xia found Mu Yangling in private, and begged her to borrow Wang Ma for a few days, and said, "My servant heard that the queen's mother and the princess's mother's fetuses were all served by Wang Ma, and our wife suffered from severe pregnancy vomiting. She gave birth before, but that was decades ago, and she only had one child, which is really not comparable to Wang Ma, so please take pity on Wang Fei." Seeing Madame Xia's sincerity, Mu Yangling nodded with a smile and said, "Then I'll let Mama Wang come over to serve her for a few days, and wait until my cousin's pregnancy is stable." Madame Xia saluted gratefully. Physician Wang here just prescribed the medicine, and Fan Zijin rushed back from the barracks. This was the first time Fan Zijin left work and ran back. Mu Yangling pursed his lips and smiled when he saw it, patted her hand and said with a smile, "Take a good rest first, I will go back and bring Wang Ma to you." He got up and saluted Fan Zijin with a smile, "Congratulations, cousin." Fan Zijin didn't even give her a corner of his eyes, he just looked at Xiao Xia. Mu Yangling smiled and took the little bear's hand back, and said to the little bear on the way, "Son, you want your brother to play with you, are you happy?" Little bear shook his head, babbling and gesticulating, saying that he prefers to play with his brother, and he became depressed after speaking. Mu Yangling patted his head and said, "Missing brother? Then when we go back, we can send something to brother and write him a letter, okay?" Little bear became emotional in an instant, took Mu Yangling's hand and ran home. He couldn't write, so Mu Yangling had to do it for him every time he wrote a letter. Although the child could not speak yet, Mu Yangling understood with just a few gestures, and communication was not a problem. Back in the study, Mu Yangling had someone grind ink and lay paper, and at the same time had someone call Wang Ma over. Wang Ma has always been Mu Yangling's chief internal affairs officer, but this time she decided to lend Wang Ma to Xiao Xia's family, which shows that they attach great importance to Xiao Xia's birth. When you get there, don't worry about everything, just care about your cousin's food. It's just about working and resting, and you will come back when her fetus is stable." Wang Ma bowed down and agreed. Generally, the fetus stabilizes in 3 months. Now that Xiao Xia has been pregnant for more than 1 month, she only needs to pass 40 days. In addition, the two houses are close, so Wang Ma simply packed her luggage. "It's over." Mu Yangling lowered his head and held Xiaoxiang's hand to write a letter to Xiaobao. At the signing place, Xiao Xiang was not willing to write the word Xiang, so he lay down on the desk and took out a piece of paper, pointing to the 3 big characters Qi Wenjin on it. He looked at Mu Yangling eagerly. This is to show off to Xiaobao that he is famous, and Mu Yangling couldn't help laughing. The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 674. Mu Yangling held Xiaoxiang's little hand and wrote Qi Wenjin at the end of the letter. Xiao Xiang pursed his lips when he saw it, satisfied, and found a piece of letter paper to give Xiaobao a small paw print as usual. Because Mu Yangling wanted to leave traces of little bear's growth when he was very young, so he printed his little hands and paws on paper every other month and made a picture album. Li Jinghua thought this idea was good, so he gave Little Treasure did the same thing. Who knew that these 2 little ones gradually became more sensible, and they would take the initiative to print their little paw prints every month and every day if their mother didn't mention it. Later, after the 2 little friends separated, they contacted each other through letters from their parents. Every time I will print my own little paws as a souvenir. When Mu Yangling waited for the ink to dry, he stuffed it into an envelope and handed it to Zhu Liang to send. He hugged the little bear and said, "In 2 days, let's go to the temple to worship the Bodhisattva, shall we?" "Yeah," little bear pushed away his mother's face, not very interested, pointed to the yard and asked his mother to take him out to play. Mu Yangling took his little hand and walked out. Guyu came in and reported, "Princess, you want the housekeeper to find some obedient boys, and they have already brought them." "Oh. Bring someone in and let me have a look." A group of 4 or 5-year-old children were led in and stood in a row, looking at Mu Yangling and the little bear at her feet with some restraint. Little bear tilted his head to look at them. Mu Yangling didn't expect that they were all such young children. Guyu whispered in her ear, "The children on the left are all sent by the tenants below. The oldest is 6 years old and the youngest is 4 years old. Because they are thin and weak, they look at the little ones. And the ones on the right are all the children of servants in the mansion. In fact there are not many of them, they are all around 4 or 5 years old. Their family did not bring many servants to Canaan, and even fewer servants brought children, and there were very few children between the ages of 4 and 6, so the princess wanted to find playmates for the little prince in their house. It was not enough to find only 3 children, so Zhu Liang had to go to the tenants to choose. The tenants knew that they were choosing playmates for the young princes of the palace, so they cleaned up the children at home, put them on in the best clothes, and prayed to God and Buddha, hoping to be selected. You know, choosing Xiao Shize's playmate will not only reduce the ration of one person in the family, but also new clothes every season. Such a small child will still have monthly money. If you don't make mistakes, you don't have to worry about your future. Therefore, there are still people who want to bribe the stewards of the palace, and send the older children in the family, but when it comes to the younger sons, how can the stewards dare to accept benefits? Those over 6 years old will not be accepted. Mu Yangling doesn't want children who are too big because he is afraid that the older children will think too much and will plot to hurt the little bear, while 5 or 6-year-old children are more sensible than the little bear, and with adults following them all the way, they can play well. Mu Yangling asked a row of children carefully, then picked out 3, and asked, "Would you like to stay and play with Xiao Shize?" There are 3 children, one is a servant of the mansion, named Goigeer. Coincidentally, his father, Qianzhong, is a deputy manager of Fan Zijian's shop. Not enough manpower, Fan Zijian gave his whole family to Mu Yangling, and now he is in charge of the grain shop in Canaan. When he heard that the palace wanted to choose playmates for the young prince, he sent his son here. Brother Gui is 4 years old this year. He is very clever, his eyes are rolling around, very energetic. The other 2 children are the children of Zhuangzi's tenants. One is 6 years old, named Zuzi, and the other is 3 years old, named Danur. Although the 3 children were timid, they all remembered their parents' instructions before they came, and when they heard the question, they all nodded fiercely, expressing their willingness. Guyu laughed and said, "Your Majesty, please change their names." Mu Yangling thought about it for a while and said, "Let's wait until they grow up a bit before getting a big name. Let's make these nicknames first." Mu Yangling patted his son and asked with a smile, "Little bear, do you want to play with the little brothers?" Little Xiong tilted his head to look at the 3 people standing in front of him in a row, his eyes were eager to try. Children like to play with children. Before, Little Bear had Xiaobao as his companion, but since he came to Canaan, he has no friends. Now he sees 3 a child who is about the same age as me, naturally willing. Little Xiong watched the 3 of them for a while, then ran up to grab Danur's hand, and dragged him into the garden. As for why Danur was chosen, because he is as tall and as big as him. Life is difficult for the farmer's family. The 6-year-old Zuza looks like a 5-year-old, the 3-year-old Danur looks smaller than the 2-year-old bear, and only Goigeer looks like a 4-year-old. Seeing the little bear running away with the egg, Zuzi and Brother Gui looked at Mu Yangling anxiously, and Mu Yangling said with a smile, "Go and play, the little prince is waiting for you in front." Zuzi and Gui Gear ran to follow. Little bear was taking out his collection of toys to share with Danur. Seeing Zuzi and Gui Gear approaching, he hesitated for a moment before handing over the 2 wooden horses reluctantly. Brother Bao gave it to him, and he babbled and said that he would keep it for him after playing. Although the 3 children didn't understand, it doesn't mean they don't know how to develop their friendship. The 4 children squatted together to play with the toys collected by Little Bear. Grab a wooden horse and run after him. Mu Yangling stood in the yard watching, and when he was tired from playing in the afternoon, Mu Yangling clapped his hands and said, "Okay, it's getting late, let's go home and have dinner." Little Bear was about to put away his toys. Zuzi hurriedly helped put them away in the basket. Danur reluctantly hugged the wooden horse in his arms, and finally handed it over to Little Bear. In the end, he reluctantly chose a Trojan horse that he didn't like very much, and Danur smiled happily, showing his white teeth. Brother Gui also wanted it very much. He looked at the little bear helplessly, but the little bear didn't give it to Brother Gui. He dragged the bamboo basket to Mu Yangling's feet, and Mu Yangling smiled and said, "I haven't said goodbye to my friends yet, Woolen Cloth." The little bear waved to them as before, and dragged a bamboo basket of toys back to the house. Mu Yangling couldn't help but burst out laughing. In the past, this child would share everything with Xiaobao, but he didn't know how to protect food. He didn't expect to be like this when playing with other children. The servants at the bottom understood that Xiao Shi's favorite was Danur, who was about his age, but Danur was indeed the most well-behaved of the 3. Brother Gui was smart, Zuzi was steady and cared for others, and the 3 of them complemented each other perfectly. Little Xiang probably went crazy playing during the day, and fell asleep on the couch after having dinner and playing for a while. Mu Yangling covered him with a small blanket, and said to Guyu, "Leave these 3 children, calm me down, people take good care of them, and you should take care of them too. Don't let the people below do things that push you up and step down, no matter who the little bear likes the most. I don't want the behavior of the servants to affect their attitude towards the little bear." Yes, Guyu bowed his head in response. "What about the other kids? They're all still living in the west courtyard. This afternoon was just a test, so it wasn't certain that those children in the west courtyard would be eliminated, so they stayed. Send them back tomorrow and give each of them 5 taels of silver. It's always tiring for them. Grain rain should fall." You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 675. The tenants did not expect that they would get money if they lost the election. They were a little sad to lose the election, but now they are all happy. 5 taels of silver, their family couldn't make so much money in a year, so they were all very happy to take the child back. The servants in the mansion looked down on the reward of 5 taels of silver. What they wanted more was the future with the young prince, but seeing that the princess attached great importance to the 3 children, even if they wanted to, they didn't dare to use it. After playing with the 3 children for 2 days, little Xiang got to know them well, and spent most of the day with them, playing together, listening to stories, and flipping through picture books to recognize pictures and words. Mu Yangling went to Zuzi and Brother Gui on purpose, asking them to be patient with Little Bear and show him some things. In this way, although Xiao Xiang hasn't uttered clear words, he can still express his thoughts in act. Also, because of having a playmate, Little Bear's mischievous ability has skyrocketed. Mu Yangling planned to go to the most famous Baiyun temple in Zhezhou city to offer incense and pray after Xiaoxia's pregnancy sickness improved. When Xiao Xiang heard that he could go out to play, He happily flipped 2 somersaults in the yard and waved his hand to let him the partners keep up. Danner frantically followed behind the little bear, but Zhu Ziyi and Gui Geer looked at Mu Yangling with some hesitation, and Mu Yangling smiled and said, "You guys also go together, and everything is packed. Just ride with us in a carriage." The 2 children immediately followed excitedly, and Madame Xia hurried over and said, "Princess, our wife asks you to ask for a peace talisman for her in front of the Buddha." Mu Yangling knew that Xiao Xia wanted to have a son, so she agreed with a smile. Because Baiyun Temple is outside Zhezhou City, it takes half a day to go back and forth, and there is not enough time to go up the mountain, so Mu Yangling decided to live on the mountain for a day. Baiyun Temple cannot keep female guests, so they can only live in Jingshui Nunnery not far from Baiyun Temple. Baiyun Temple is named Baiyun Temple because it is located in the middle of the mountain, and the top of the mountain looks like it is above the white clouds from the bottom up. But stay where you are, although horses can go up the mountain, but in order to show sincerity, everyone who comes to worship the Buddha will go up in person. Mu Yangling was no exception. Leaving the carriage and groom behind, she hugged the little bear and went up the stairs, and the servants behind also hugged the younger Danner and brother Gui. The host of Baiyun Temple received the notice earlier and greeted Mu Yangling in front of the temple 1 step earlier. Mu Yangling smiled and said, "The host is polite. It's really an honor for the temple to have the benefactor come. The guest room is ready. The benefactor might as well go to rest first. The fast meal will be ready soon." It was past noon, and the group was indeed tired and hungry. Mu Yangling's thoughtful service to the host expressed thankfulness. When it was nap time, little Xiong felt a little sleepy, and fell asleep on the bed after eating the fast meal. Mu Yangling didn't take him to pray to the Buddha until he woke up. The little bear knelt down on the futon and worshipped 3 times, then looked at his mother. Mu Yangling raised his head to look at the Buddha above his head, who looked down on all beings with a merciful smile, sighed slightly, and prayed in his heart, "If there is a God in this world, then please bless my child with health and longevity, and speak as soon as possible." Believers are willing to eat vegetarian food and do good deeds, even if it shortens their lifespan. Mu Yangling bowed 3 times and kowtowed 3 times respectfully, got up with the little bear, looked at the people behind him, and said with a smile, "You guys also go to worship, and don't make noise in front of the Buddha." The maids and mothers-in-law responded, and they all went to worship Buddha quietly together. The host is busy leading Mu Yangling to write the merit book. Southern Zhezhou is remote, and the biggest official here is the second-rank governor. However, the former governor's mansion is not located in Zhezhou, so there are very few governors who can swim to Baiyun Temple. Mu Yangling can be regarded as their most distinguished guest ever. The sesame oil donated by Mu Yangling was not much, only 200 taels, which was less compared to the 400 or 500 taels of some wealthy families in Zhezhou City, but the Zhaik monk was very happy, and only relied on the merit book. With this one, they can attract many believers. The scenery of Baiyun Temple is winding, even better than that of Yongfu Temple. Mu Yangling took the little bear to play for a while, and only brought them down to the Jingshui Temple on the mountainside in the evening. Jingshui Temple is just above the dock, and its scale is twice as small as that of Baiyun Temple, but the guest rooms are well furnished, because most of the female guests who go up the mountain stay in Jingshui Temple, and they can get a lot of money for sesame oil just by relying on this, so the Jingshui Temple is very clean, and there is no filth like the general temple. Mu Yangling and the others were arranged in the best guest room as soon as they arrived, while the male servants were locked out. Mu Yangling made some arrangements. Those who should be on the floor should be on the floor, and those who should be patrolling. Because I investigated before coming here, there are Vuni in Jingshui Temple, and there are monks in Baiyun Temple. There seemed to be noise in the east courtyard. After all, it was outside, and Mu Yangling was very alert. She sat up and asked, "Le Shun, what's going on outside?" Le Shun hurriedly went out to look around with the lights on. There was a faint light in the east courtyard, and the noise quickly quieted down. At this moment, only the sound of insects in the mountains and forests could be heard. It was so quiet that the noise just now was an illusion. Not daring to relax, he called a woman who knew martial arts, and ordered, "Take someone over there and ask, what happened? The mother-in-law should be back soon. It's a nun in the nunnery who is sick and wants to seek medical treatment from the presiding teacher, so there is a lot of noise." Because the princess lives in the west courtyard, they are afraid of disturbing the princess, so they calm down again. Mu Yangling frowned and asked, "The east courtyard is the residence of the nuns in the nunnery. How do I remember that they live in the back room?" Back to the princess, the east courtyard is the residence of the host and several teachers. The nuns do live in the back room. The one who is sick may be the little nun who attends the host and several teachers. Mu Yangling lowered his eyes, thought for a while and asked, "Is there a nun with a new order in the nunnery? Or is there a nobleman with hair to practice?" The mother-in-law was at a loss, and Guyu hurriedly said, "Go back to the princess, I have asked before, and there is no new nun who has placed an order, and there is no noble person who brought hair to practice." The mother-in-law breathed a sigh of relief. It's good that Miss Guyu knew about these things. The two big maids beside the princess, Lichun is in charge of the affairs inside the house, and Guyu is in charge of the affairs outside the house. Mu Yangling narrowed his eyes, waved his hand and said, "Okay, it's not a big deal, let's go down and rest." The people serving in the room withdrew one after another, but Lichun and Guyu stayed behind. Mu Yangling said in a low voice, "Talk to Xiaoting and ask the guards to visit the east courtyard." Because of the good incense, Jingshui Temple rarely touches the world. Most of them are people who practice Buddhism latently. Since the host and teachers are all people who are latent practitioners, how can they let the little nun serve them? Lichun and Guyu's expressions changed. The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 676. It's not Zionai, the nunnery is so secretive, could it be that bad people have mixed in? Lichun and Guyu became nervous and looked at each other. Guyu immediately turned around and went out. Lichun covered Mu Yangling's body with the blanket and said in a low voice, "Your Majesty, do you want to get dressed first and get ready?" Mu Yangling nodded slightly. "Don't make any noise," she told the servants to back down, just because she was afraid of abusing the grass. As soon as Mu Yangling got dressed, she heard the sound of swords coming from the east courtyard. A sharp light flashed in her eyes, and Lichun trembled as soon as her body became imposing. She felt that the princess had suddenly become a sharp long sword came with a fierce aura, making it impossible for people to get close to it, but when her heart trembled, the aura was instantly restrained, turning into a bronze broadsword, although it was still standing there. But Lichun knows that once someone touches her bottom line, this rusty bronze broadsword will be as sharp as it is, protecting the person she wants to protect. Lichun suddenly felt relieved, and stepped aside respectfully. Mu Yangling sat in front of the little bear's bed and put on his clothes. Maybe he felt uncomfortable. The little bear muttered something in his sleep, and unconsciously slapped his mother's hand away with his little hand, turned over and continued to sleep. Mu Yangling dressed him up and covered him with a blanket. If something happened, he could leave with a blanket. The sound of swords in the east courtyard became louder and louder, and the guards stationed outside quickly rushed in and surrounded the guest room where they lived. The guard leader Chi San reported outside the door. Mu Yangling nodded slightly, and asked Lichun to let him in. What happened? Chi San knelt on the ground and said, "Mrs. Hui, there are strangers hiding in the east courtyard, our talents will be stopped when they enter, and the two sides will fight each other. The subordinates want to protect the safety of the princess and the little prince, so they don't know where they are." Exact circumstances. Mu Yangling asked, "How many people were sent there?" 3. "Send 2 more, Mu Yangling said, "quick battle." Chi San agreed without hesitation, turned around and sent the two of them over there, and soon, the news came back that Wu Ni from Jingshui Temple actually helped the other party to resist, and there were actually two monks among them. Here it is Jingshui Nunnery, not Baiyun Temple, so how could there be monks? Qi Sanyi was afraid that both Baiyun Temple and Jingshui Temple would be involved in this matter, and their 20 or so guards might not be able to protect Wang Hao and Xiao Shixian. Qi San didn't dare to be negligent, and asked Mu Yangling to leave immediately with Xiao Shizi. "Princess, my subordinate will arrange someone to escort you down the mountain." Mu Yangling sat by the bed and did not move. Baiyun Mountain is so high that it reaches into the clouds. It takes more than half an hour to ride a horse from the mountain to the bottom. The cliff on the south side and the mountain on the back are rugged and difficult. Once the monks of Baiyun Mountain chase kill, where do we hide? Qi San's face turned pale, and Mu Yangling continued, "After leaving Baiyun Mountain, it will take more than 2 hours to reach Zhezhou City. Why don't you just stay here, use the Qingshui Temple as a defense, and have a place to hide?" Qi San knelt on the ground, both ashamed and sad. "It's all my fault that I didn't investigate clearly before. I didn't expect that Jingshui Temple and Baiyun Mountain were colluding with the rebels." Mu Yangling shook her head slowly. Up until now, she hadn't figured out why Baiyun Mountain and Jingshui Temple did this. "Can you see clearly who they are hiding?" Qi San shook his head. "Our talent was discovered as soon as he entered the east courtyard, and the other party killed him without saying a word, so the two parties fought each other. Could it be a misunderstanding?" "Your Majesty, not to mention Jingshui Temple, Baiyun Mountain was also emptied in advance because of your coming to worship Buddha. There are no other pilgrims except us. Besides, we called out our names when we started, but the other party aggressively approached us with a murderous look. How can there be any misunderstanding in the posture of silence? I just don't know who they are hiding." Qi San was a little suspicious that the former court rebelled, so it couldn't be Xixia people, right? Both the Han people and the Miao people in Qianan are very hostile to the Xixia people, but if the previous dynasty rebelled, wouldn't all the princes of the previous dynasty die? Such royal family secrets. Qi San looked at the princess, wanted to ask but dared not. But Mu Yangling didn't notice his expression, he was so focused on how to retreat. Mu Yangling knocked on the table and asked, "Where are the two birds raised by the young prince?" Li Chun hurriedly said, "It's hanging outside. Give it to Qi San, and let it fly immediately." Qi San twitched the corners of his mouth. "Those two sparrows were caught by Xiao Shizi at the foot of Baiyun Mountain this morning, and even the cages were made out of weeds and twigs by the roadside." Qi San really wanted to shout, "Wang Fei, those are sparrows, not pigeons, or two sparrows that have just been caught. After the release, bring all of us to the guest room here, close the door and set up a second line of defense. You go tell the people in the east courtyard and ask them if they intend to rebel. If Baiyun Temple and Jingshui Temple insist on resisting, just leave them alone, find a way to withdraw everyone. We just need to guard this guest house. If there is any misunderstanding, please ask the abbots of Baiyun Temple and Jingshui Temple to explain to me together." Mu Yangling looked at Qi San said, "Imply to them that we have notified Zhezhou that we are trapped. No matter whether we are dead or alive today, they don't want to be alone. There are nearly 1,000 monks and nuns in Baiyun Temple and Jingshui Temple. I don't believe it. They dare to gamble with this." Qi San's heart trembled, and he said in a low voice, "But Wang Fei, we have no way to inform." Mu Yangling looked at the lights and said quietly, "Didn't we release two pigeons?" Qi San's complexion changed, and he knelt on the ground without moving. "This move is too dangerous. Once Baiyun Temple and Jingshui Temple are not fooled, they will surely die. At that time, Baiyun Temple will say that the mountain road is rugged, and they will be found by accidentally slipping off the cliff. An excuse, even if the prince is angry. If there is no evidence, I'm afraid there is nothing to do with them." Mu Yangling's face softened slightly, and he said gently, Just like you don't want to gamble with the safety of me and Xiao Shizi, they don't dare to gamble with the lives of thousands of monks and nuns behind them. It depends on who is cruel enough. Go, or it will be too late. Qi San gritted his teeth, kowtowed 3 times to Mu Yangling, turned around and ran away. Not long after, the yard became panicked and bustling, and all the servants were driven into the yard. Little Xiang, who was awakened by the noise, opened the door, stood on the steps and looked at them quietly, and said loudly, "What are you panicking? My princess and Xiao Shizi are still here." There was a sudden silence in the yard, and everyone was terrified. Mu Yangling ordered the strong servants to guard the second gate with sticks and other objects, and the others lined up in the yard in groups of 3. All holding impromptu weapons in their hands, and the women and girls who can fight are tightly guarding Mu Yangling. The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 677. The chaotic courtyard just now suddenly became orderly, and the whole courtyard became quiet, and the momentum changed. In the darkness, some people believed that these servants and girls were a bodyguard. Mu Yangling ordered Daner's 3 children to be handed over to the servant who knew how to fight. Then he looked at the line below and said, 1 general and 1 soldier can be an army. Without a general, 10,000 soldiers are just soldiers. As far as I have no combat power, I, Mu Yangling, dare not say that I can be a general. It is still possible to instruct you to guard a courtyard. If you obey the order, I will guarantee that the courtyard will not be broken. At least someone will get out alive. If you don't obey orders, then no one in this courtyard, including me and Xiao Shizi, will be able to escape. Willing to serve the princess, kneeled on the ground in the courtyard. Mu Yangling smiled slightly, and said, "As long as I can get through the crisis tonight, I will remember both those who survived and those who died. The family members of those who died in battle will be taken care of by the palace. A future, regardless of gender." Everyone's hearts became hot, their eyes shone brightly, and they stared at Mu Yangling with piercing eyes. Mu Yangling ordered, "Now, everyone obeys orders, set up traps, and line up. Once someone rushes in, shoot and kill." She stared at them seriously, and asked loudly, "Someone wants to take our lives, how should we deal with it?" As soon as the words came out, everyone was furious and full of momentum. They clenched the sticks in their hands and roared loudly, "Kill, kill, kill." The sound resounded through the sky and reached the ears of other people in Baiyun Temple and Jingshui Temple, and those who watched secretly were startled. In Baiyun Temple, the presiding officer Jaikan kept turning the rosary beads in his hand. Hearing a faint roar, the rosary beads in his hand couldn't help moving, and his slightly closed eyes couldn't help but also opened. This is not going to work. Once the family members of Rongjun Wangfu die in Baiyun Mountain, I am afraid that we will be inseparable from Jingshui Temple, not to mention that there is such a big commotion now. Rongjun Wang is famous for doting on his wife and children. At that time, nearly 1,000 monks and nuns in our monastery and nunnery could not escape death. The rosary beads in Ji Kong's hand stopped, and he remained silent. Ji Chen became anxious, stomped his feet and said, "Brother presiding officer, you have made up your mind. Our Baiyun Temple has been established for 200 years, so it can't be destroyed overnight." Jaikan closed his eyes and said, "You are wrong, our Baiyun Temple has been established for 500 years. Brother Presider." Ji Chen stomped his feet with a look of embarrassment on his face. "Dali and Daki are 2 countries, we are now Baiyun Temple in Qianan, not Dali Baiyun Temple, not to mention the guests they sent are not their Baiyun Temple pilgrims. The Nanjian Baiyun Temple needs to support Chongsheng Temple, we Qianan Baiyun Temple does not need it." Ji Kong looked at him displeased, and said with a sinking heart, "We can't monopolize this matter, we have to discuss it with the 2 uncles." Ji Chen's expression turned ugly. "Then tell the monks to stop first, otherwise if you hurt the female relatives of the Rongjun prince's mansion, everything will be irreversible. Ji Kong said indifferently, you underestimate the people of the Rongjun Prince's mansion too much. They were the ones who made the roar just now, so it shows that they still have energy. Ji Kong got up and went to the backyard, Jian followed behind him with an ugly expression. Master Mo and Master Liaji were already sitting in the meditation room. When they saw them coming in, they raised their eyebrows and looked at them. Liaji asked, what's going on outside? Why does it sound like you heard the sound of killing? Although the two of them have the highest seniority in Baiun Temple, they have long ignored the common affairs of the temple. When they heard the movement outside, they thought that there was a rebellion in Canaan. Tunbing soldiers, for 200 years, no matter how many war disasters have affected them, how could someone rush to the mountain at this time? Ji Chen bitter tongue, looked to Ji Kong. Ji Kong paused, handed the document in his hand to Master Ji, bowed his head and said, I am now in the Jingshui Temple, but I was discovered by the people of Rongjun Palace somehow, and the two sides handed over. Liao Ji couldn't help but make a fuss. Nonsense, why don't you tell them to stop? Are you going to destroy Baiun Temple's hundreds of years of foundation? At this time, Jingxin, the host of Jingshui Temple, was also urging Mrs Yuanfang, Uncle, let's stop, Rongjun Palace has released pigeons, and something happened to the princess and Xiao Shizi in our Jingshui Temple. The nunnery will never be restored. Mrs Yuanfang couldn't help picking up the rosary beads, she lowered her eyes and said nothing. Mrs Jingxin's expression changed a few times, she turned around and said, Master Uncle can't make up his mind, I am the host of Jingshui Temple, but I can't see it with my own eyes. Something happened to the Purification Temple. Do you think that we can keep the Jingshui nunnery by telling the truth? Yuanfang said in an obscure voice, having a member of the royal family of an enemy country is a capital offense. Jingxin straightened her back and said, although it is a capital crime, it is better to be borne by Jingxin alone than dragging the entire Jingshui Temple. Besides, my Buddha is merciful, the Rongjun princess and Xiaoshizi and their servants are innocent, so they can do less harm. 1 point for killing is 1 point less. Yuanfang was furious, do I still want you to teach me? Where did Princess Rongjun go innocently? If she hadn't sent people to visit the East Court at night, none of these things would have happened. Uncle Master, Jing Xian didn't expect Yuanfang to be so biased, and said with tears in her eyes, Uncle Master has practiced Buddhism for many years, and he thought he had gained some benefits, but he didn't expect it to be the same. Princess Rongjun asked someone to visit the East Courtyard, but obviously it can be avoided, but if it wasn't for the secret guards of the East Court who took the initiative without leaving any room, how could things have come to this? In fact, Jingxin still doesn't understand why those hidden guards took action. They hid in the dark room. In the dark night, the guards of the Rongjun Palace did not dare to move too much. They will definitely not be discovered. They can obviously avoid this disaster. Jingxin had made up her mind, she pushed the door and was about to go out. Yuanfang wanted to stop her, but was caught by the viewness around Jingxin. Only then did Yuanfang know that Jingshui Temple had been controlled by Jingxin unconsciously. Her heart can't help panicking, but Jingxin has already gone to tell all the viewness to stop. The monks of Baiun Temple who came to help couldn't help but pause. Although Baiun Temple and Jingshui Temple are one temple and one temple, they have been helping each other all the time. They are not familiar with those black-clothed people who hide their heads and show their tails, so they calmly shouted to stop. They also stopped their movements. Seeing that the people from Rongjun Palace obediently walked around them and surrounded the man in black, they couldn't help but take 3 steps back and stood up on guard. A woman surrounded by men in black shouted violently, Jingxin, what do you mean? How dare you disobey my master? Calmly recited the Buddha's name, and said, Benefactor, instead of fighting and losing both sides, it is better to sit down and have a good talk. Princess Rongjun is kind-hearted, and maybe she won't pursue it. While meditating to persuade everyone to stop fighting first, Mo Wu and Liao Ji had already arrived in a hurry with Ji Kong and Ji Ang, and were captured by the guards of the palace at the door. Chi San cupped his hands and said, "I have offended the master." He asked people to place knives on the necks of the four of them, but the four of them were at ease, their eyes showed kindness, and they smiled and said, "Please benefactor, please lead us to see Master Jingzin, the poor monk willing to be a lobbyist." You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 678. The guest courtyard where Mu Yangling lived was surrounded by groups, and all the guards were guarding the door, with 5 steps at a time, and the courtyard door was tightly guarded. Mo Wu and Liao Ji looked at each other, they took the lead and walked forward, followed by Jing Xian and Yuan Fang, followed by Ji Kong and Ji Chen. The guards put their hands on the hilts of their sabers and watched them, realizing that if they made a slight movement, the other party would definitely cut off their heads with a knife, but Ji Kong felt that it was a mistake for Rongjun Palace to deploy most of the guards here. Once someone rushes into the yard, aren't they too weak to defend? He felt a little pity, if it wasn't for the Rongjun Palace carrying pigeons to inform the foreign aid, or if all these people were left behind, he would have a way to wipe them out. A thought flashed by, and when the courtyard door opened, the 6 of them were startled. There was even a battle team displayed inside, and it was so quiet. If it wasn't for the guards leading the way holding a lantern, they almost didn't notice it in the darkness. Seeing their queue, Ji Kong's face paled. Passing through the queue was the second door of the guest courtyard. There were also 2 guards standing in front of the door. Seeing Chi San, he bowed and saluted, and opened the courtyard door. In the whole yard, only a lantern was lit on the porch, and there was a faint light coming from the house. Although it was dark, everyone could still see Mu Yangling sitting on the steps. In the yard in front of her, there were also the difference in the team is that the team outside the first door is all male servants, but here, they are all maids. Wu Wu even saw an 11 or 12-year-old girl inside, holding a stick tightly in her hand. He stared at them fiercely. Realize that. Take a deep breath, soldiers, potential also. It's just that a group of servants are so imposing, even if there are no pigeons to report, they probably won't be able to break in. If there is no news of the family members of the palace for a long time, they will definitely go up the mountain to investigate. Wu Wu glanced at Ji Kong. Ji Kong's face was pale, although the uncle didn't say it clearly. He understood what he wanted to ask. Such a person, can you fight and hide it? I just don't know who made such a defense. I knew that Chi Heiran was a handsome talent, but I didn't expect that there would be such a general among the slaves. Talents come out in large numbers, and the world is at peace. Is this a sign of the prosperity of Dachi? Realizing that he had crossed the team and walked down the steps while thinking wildly, he saluted Mu Yangling who was sitting on top, and said with a smile, "Amitba, forgive me, the mountains and fields are a bit chaotic. I wonder if the princess and the little prince are still okay." Mu Yangling glanced at them blankly, then looked at Chi San, and asked, "Are there any casualties among the guards in the mansion?" Back to the princess, 1 person died, 2 people were seriously injured, and 1 person was slightly injured. The dead ones should be collected first, and the wounded ones should be carried down for the accompanying doctor to diagnose and treat. Mu Yangling asked in a deep voice, "Have the bandits been caught?" Chi San glanced at Master Jingzin, bowed his head and replied, "No, it's just that the 2 sides have ceased fighting, and now the room they live in is surrounded by subordinates. Wu Ni from Jingshui Temple has not intervened." Mu Yangling nodded slightly, looked at Jingzin and Yuan Fang, and asked, "Master Jingzin, now can you tell me who the guest is staying in the east courtyard of this princess?" When Mu Yangling didn't answer the question, they realized that their hearts sank when they asked about the wounded, and they felt even more depressed and worried when they heard her straightforward question. Master Jingxin looked at Zhiwu and Liaji. He was sent by Baiyun Temple, and Baiyun Temple should bear half of the responsibility for this matter anyway. Mo Wu and Liao Ji gave a wry smile, stepped forward and said, "Princess, can I take a step to speak?" Mu Yangling took a deep look at the two of them, then got up and turned sideways, stretched out his hand and said, "Please." Mu Yangling waved for the warrior woman to carry the little bear to the inner room. Chi San didn't dare to let Mu Yangling be alone with them, so he also followed. After realizing it, he glanced at the servants and maids in the inner room, and Mu Yangling smiled and said, "Master, you must show some sincerity. I don't dare to let the child outside." Wu Wu was a little puzzled. In his opinion, wouldn't it be safer to put the child in a side room and send warrior women and guards to protect it? But now that the two sides don't trust each other, he dare not raise this issue. For Mu Yangling, the safest place in the world is by her side, and she absolutely does not allow the child to leave her sight. After thinking about it for a while, he let Jaichen, and Yuan Fang stay, and he went in with Weavu and meditation. Jaichen and Yuan Fang were unwilling and hesitated. There was a flash of light in Mu Yangling's lowered eyes, and he looked at Weavu with interest, and Weavu's heart was shocked. He glanced at Mu Yangling warily, then turned his head and glared at the two of them, waving his hand and saying, "Go down soon, just go down, wait outside the door." Jaichen gritted his teeth and had no choice but to back down, but Yuan Fang was beyond Weavu's control. She said with a sullen face, "The poor nun is the tallest elder in the Jingshui nunnery, I should stay and let Jingxin stay outside." Jingxin lowered her eyes, chanted the Buddha's name, and said in a calm tone, "Master, I am the host of Jingshui Temple. I will naturally take care of this matter. You and brother Jaichen stay outside first. Don't worry, nothing will happen of." Mu Yangling was impatient to hear them back and forth, and sneered, "Could it be that things can be different because of different speakers? Or you haven't made up your mind on how to make up this lie?" Amitabha, the benefactor of the princess, if the monks don't tell lies, how can they lie to the benefactor outside? Wu Wu hurriedly clarified. "The monks don't kill people, don't you kill one now, and kill four," Mu Yangling said bluntly. "If we didn't happen to bring 2 carrier pigeons, we could inform the people outside it's not just 1 or 2 who are afraid of death." Realizing lowering his eyes, he could only recite the Buddha's name compassionately, without making any excuses. Mu Yangling impatiently waved his hand and said, "Okay, don't you just want to talk to me? It's very simple. I'll first chat with Wu Wu, Master Liaji, and Master Jingxin, and then I will talk to Master Jaichen and Master Jiang. Talk to Mrs Yuan Fang. Come, please invite these 3 to the side room for tea first, don't neglect them." As soon as Wu Wu was about to object, the guards had their knives around their necks, and they escorted Ji Kong and the 3 to leave. Wu Wu looked at Mu Yangling in surprise, but seeing her bright eyes with a stern look, he immediately knew that they had left for a while. Make a wrong move. Mu Yangling snorted coldly in her heart. She almost killed everyone in their yard, and now she sent them to the door automatically. How stupid is she to send people out again? Liao Ji obviously understood. He and Wu Wu glanced at each other, and both sighed slightly. Now that the abbot and elders of Baiyun Temple are here, the dragons in the temple have no leader. How can they hold down the family members of Rongjun Prince's mansion? The only blame is that they underestimated the enemy, thinking that they only had 20 guards. How did they expect there to be a general inside? With a wave of Mu Yangling's hand, only a warrior woman and Li Shun were left in the inner room. Gu Yu led everyone back outside and guarded the door, while Chi San stayed in the room, standing behind Mu Yangling for personal protection. The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 679. Wu Wu took a look at Chi San, suspecting that he was the one who was armed with general talent and guarding the yard, so he was a little more cautious. He thought about it, bent slightly and said, "Scared the princess and the little prince, don't you? The matter in the courtyard was a misunderstanding." "Misunderstanding," Chi-san snorted coldly, "knowing that our princess is coming to pay respects to the Buddha, since Baiun Temple and Jingshui Temple have been cleared, how can there be such a dangerous person in the east courtyard of Jingshui Temple? I don't think this is a misunderstanding, but you harbor evil intentions." Wu Wu was about to explain, but Mu Yangling asked, "The master and the teacher haven't told me who the people in the east courtyard are." Wu Wu was silent for a moment. Jingxin sighed slightly, looked up and was about to speak, but Wu Wu said before her, "Let's talk about this poor monk. Jingshui Nunnery is only entrusted by our Baiun Temple, and I don't know much about it." Jingxin looked at Sao gratefully. Realization directly looked at Mu Yangling and said, "Our Baiun Temple has been built for more than 200 years, which is not a long time among all the temples, but it can become one of the 3 major temples in southern Guizhou, all because we still have the main temple. Help." "Oh? Baiun Temple is a branch? I don't know which branch of Baiun Temple it is. There are many temples called Baiun Temple in the world, both big and small." "Nanjian Baiun Temple." Lu Wu slightly bent over and said. Mu Yangling raised his eyebrows, "In Dali." Wu Wu smiled, "I didn't expect the princess to know that Nanjian County is in Dali. More than 200 years ago, there was no Dali kingdom, and the world was unified. There was only Dali County." He had deep feelings for him. He heard that the people in Qianan were tough and the Miao people refused to be educated, so the two discussed Buddhism. Same, so it's confusing. Realization said, although Dali is also difficult and barren, the people live and work in peace and contentment. It is all because of Buddhism. Therefore, Lu Huaji, the governor of southern Qianan at that time, started to build a temple to educate the people. However, this temple is easy to build. Monks and nuns are rare, so Lu Huaji asked Duan, and Duan came forward to persuade Baiun Temple in Nanjian and Jingshui Temple at the foot of the mountain to send 180 monks and nuns to settle in southern Guizhou. Water Temple. Mu Yangling raised his eyebrows, realizing that his words sounded nice, but it was just Buddhism trying to win believers, while Lu Huaji and Duans were cooperating for their own interests. If you really want to educate the people, then you should teach them to read and write. Among other things, a book of the Analects of Confucius can wash your brain. During the spring and autumn period and the Warring States period, there were still 100 schools of thought contending. At that time, Confucianism was not prominent. In the Qin dynasty, jurisprudence flourished, and Taoism in the Han dynasty was far superior to Confucianism. Doctrines are gradually declining, and Confucianism has long since become a national study. Don't you see that Confucianism is mostly cited in the current imperial examinations? Lu Huaji's abandonment of Confucianism and Buddhism was definitely not for the purpose of educating the people. Although Mu Yangling didn't know what the purpose was, there is no doubt that the Baiun Temple and Jingshui Temple in southern Guizhou may become the eyeliner of Dali Kingdom. Naturally, Dali was only separated in the past 20 or 30 years, and they may not be able to count what happened 200 years ago. Mu Yangling knocked on the table and asked, "Have you always been in contact with Dali Kingdom?" Wu Wu was silent for a moment, then nodded and said, "Yes, there is still contact. I'm afraid the princess doesn't know that Dali and Dazhu haven't completely closed the discussion room, and the discussion room has been open since the founding of Daki. You guys don't always rely on the market to connect, do you?" Mu Yangling sneered, "As far as I know, there is only one market between Dali and Qianan, and there are only dozens of households living around it. It's extremely high, and the debate field has long existed in name only, and you dare to hold your bare heads in front of the officials." Wu Wu said with a smile, "My lord, although the public affairs are in decline compared to before, they are not as bleak as you said. There are a lot of vehicles and pedestrians passing by every day. It is really not eye-catching to see 1 or 2 monks there." "Oh? Is it not noticeable to appear at a fixed time? Mu Yangling put the teacup heavily on the table, and sneered, did Master Wu regard this princess as an ignorant woman and child? Dolly has a channel for private transactions, and the Han people trade more and more with the Han people in the central part. Tell me, who will go to the market? There is a customs account book for last year's tax market in the prince's study. Master Wu Wu wants to tell me that the officials are so corrupt that they swallowed all the customs duties. Wu Wu's face changed slightly, and Liao Ji hurriedly said, Princess, please calm down. I'm afraid junior brother Wu Wu didn't make it very clear. We did meet at the temple, but we appeared in the temple. There is a small temple near the temple. We often meet there, so the officials stationed in the market will not find us, and we seldom go to the market, we only see the bustle there, so we naturally feel that the business is very good. Mu Yangling sneered, although he didn't believe it in his heart, he didn't refute any more, he just motioned for them to continue, so you can pass the news of Daki to Dolly, and you can also receive people from Dolly. Wu Wu hurriedly argued, my lord, our Buddhist family does not participate in state affairs, and most of our contacts are exchanged and transcribed scriptures, and we don't pass on news that is not good for Dichi. As for this time, alas, it's a long story. 3 days ago, a monk from Baiyun Temple in Nanjian suddenly came to the temple with a girl and her entourage, saying that she was the daughter of Wang Ping, the right-wing guard of the Dali kingdom. She was framed and imprisoned, and the entire Wang family was imprisoned. Ms. Wang escaped because she was not at home, but she was hunted down all the time. I just tried to escort her to Qianan, the purpose is to let her live a safe life, at least I can leave a drop of blood for the Wang family. Seeing that Mu Yangling's face was pale, I didn't know what she was thinking, so I could only continue, because she is a female guest, so the poor monk entrusted Jingshui Temple to take care of her. And just received the news that the princess is coming to pay respects to the Buddha. We wanted to move the person down the mountain, but Miss Wang was seriously injured before, so she dared not move anymore, so we had to arrange the person into the east courtyard. Wu Wu looked at Jing Xian, and said helplessly, as for what happened tonight, the poor monk has no way of knowing. The poor monk was resting in the temple at that time. Jing Xian hastily said, go back to Madame Wang Fei, Miss Wang is really hurt too badly, she suddenly developed a high fever tonight, the hermitage was short of medicinal materials, her maid panicked and alarmed the people in the east courtyard. Jingxin said helplessly, although the poor nun left Miss Wang in the nunnery, not many people in the nunnery knew about it, so 2 women suddenly appeared in the east courtyard, which caused the commotion, and the concubine sent guards after investigation. Those dead men who were secretly protecting Miss Wang mistakenly thought that the guards were the ones who came to kill them, so they handed over without saying a word. This is really a misunderstanding, not aimed at the princess and the little prince. The reborn wife is farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 680. Realization and Jingxin both know that it is impossible to completely remove Baiyun Temple and Jingshui Temple from this matter, and what they want is to define the nature of the incident as adultery with neighboring countries, which is better than assassinating the family members of Rongjun Wangfu, the far lesser charge of attempted treason. The former only pursues a few insiders like them, while the latter, nearly 1,000 monks and nuns in one temple and one nunnery, may not be able to protect them. Mu Yangling asked, where's Miss Wang? Jing Xian hurriedly bowed and said, still in the east courtyard, unconscious due to high fever. Mu Yangling nodded slightly, if what you are complaining about is true, everything is a misunderstanding, and I will leave a bloodline to the Wang family. Mu Yangling sneered, if you had told me the details earlier, wouldn't it be possible that my Rongjun prince's mansion would still be here? Can't it kill a weak woman? There won't be so many things happening. Mo Wu and the others bowed their heads in shame. What the princess taught me is that we are the ones who treat the belly of a gentleman with the heart of a villain. I also ask Master Jingxin to ask Miss Wang's hidden guards to lay down their weapons. The princess is accompanied by a doctor and some common medicines on this trip. Send Miss Wang here for treatment. It's best not to die in the sword under, but died under the pain. This is very blunt, but for the sake of Miss Wang, but enlightenment and meditation did not dare to respond, because they don't know whether what Mu Yangling said is true or not. What if they are deceiving them, and they will be killed if they are deceived? Enlightenment and Jingxin hesitated for a moment, looked at each other and said, Wang Fei, why don't you let Miss Wang stay in the nunnery to cultivate, and the poor nun will take the doctor to show her. Mu Yangling smiled slightly, and said, Master Jingxin, I personally believe what you said is true, but all this has not been verified. Do you think I will put such a dangerous daughter of a neighboring country's general in the nunnery? This princess knows what you are worried about. Don't worry, I will not kill her. At least until her identity is found out, I will not kill her. After the investigation, the facts are as you said. Settle down in Qianan, and protect her Wang family's blood. Jing Xian's heart beat wildly, and she responded helplessly, the poor nun can only try. My concubine only gives you 2/4 of an hour. If they don't lay down their weapons and surrender obediently, the guards of the palace will rush in. Anyone who resists will be killed. Mu Yangling's voice was somewhat murderous, said coldly. Mu Yangling asked Qi San to take Jingxin to the east courtyard, and asked Jiechen, and Yuan Fang to come again, and then asked Jiechen in front of enlightenment, Master Jiechen, where is the east courtyard living? Who? Jiechen said without looking sideways, Hui Wangfei, the daughter of Dali Kingdom Yowai General Wang Ping lives here. Mu Yangling knew that they hadn't colluded with each other before they came, so the identity of the people in the east courtyard was real. Mu Yangling nodded slightly, and asked them to sit down without further questioning. The few people didn't expect Mu Yangling to ask such a question, and they were a little apprehensive, and the room fell silent for a moment, which was terrifyingly quiet. Mo Wu and Liao Ji both closed their eyes and slid the rosary beads in their hands. Mu Yangling also drank tea calmly, but Yuan Fang secretly became anxious when he saw that there was no meditation in the room, and kept looking at Ji Kong, who couldn't help asking said, Wang concubine, where is Master Jingxin? She went to ask Miss Wang to come over. As soon as these words came out, both Jiechen and Yuan Fang's expressions changed slightly. By the way, is the monk who brought Miss Wang here still? Mu Yangling was about to drink tea when he suddenly remembered such a person. Wu Wu leaned slightly, and said respectfully, go back to the princess, the man was seriously injured, he was only led to the temple, and he died of his injuries not long after. Mu Yangling nodded slightly, neither believing nor disbelieving. Jiechen and Yuan Fang couldn't help becoming anxious. How could people fall into the hands of wrong Jun Wangfu? Wouldn't the price they paid for protecting her be in vain? From Dali all the way to Qianan, how many people died? Jiechen and Yuan Fang's eyes gradually turned red, and they looked at each other calmly. Ji Kong's gaze quickly turned around the room, seeing that there were only 2 guards in the room, and one was still standing in front of the inner room door. He could not help but wink at Yuan Fang. Quit empty. Evil, stop. Wu Wu and Liao Ji shouted loudly, wanting to stop Ji Kong and Yuan Fang, but he and Liao Ji sat on Mu Yangling's left-hand side. Ji Kong and Yuan Fang sat on Mu Yangling's right-hand side. The distance was the same. The other party first they took one step and couldn't stop them at all. Mu Yangling straightened her body the moment Jiechen and Yuan Fang moved. As soon as Yuan Fang rushed up, she kicked her in the chest and abdomen, kicking her away, and she flew out and fell to the ground. Hearing a few clicks, it should be that the ribs in her chest were broken, but Ji Kong was stopped by the guards behind her, and the 2 of them fought into a ball instantly. Ji Chen's round eyes widened, and he shouted, Brother host, stop. Mu Yangling's first glance was at the guard guarding the door of the inner room. Seeing that he was motionless and standing guard in front of the door with his sword in his hand, he was relieved a little. Seeing Ji Kong's movements became more and more fierce, Mu Yangling felt angry in his chest. Picked up the teacup on the table, watched his movement for a moment, then threw the teacup in his hand, which happened to seal his next movement. Ji Kong paused for a moment, and then dodged sideways, but the guard's knife had already passed. He stabbed out with one step, hit his waist and kicked him down. Ji Kong let out a pained cry, and fell beside Yuan Fang. The guard put a sword across his neck, preventing him from raising his head. Mu Yangling turned his head to look at Wu Wu with a pale face, and said with a smile, "Master Wu Wu, how can I believe that the people in the East Courtyard are just the orphans of a destroyed general?" Wu Wu knelt in front of Mu Yangling, and said, "Princess Wang Fei, that is indeed Wang Ping's daughter, the poor monk did not lie." Liao Ji and Ji Chen also hurriedly knelt on the ground. Mu Yangling was non-committal. She snorted coldly, and looked at Ji Kong. "You want to use me as a pawn to rescue the people in the East Courtyard? Ji Kong, aren't you the abbot of Baiyun Temple? You are willing to give up the whole temple for a woman with more than 700 people your life. You are generous. Come, take these two people down and detain them separately." Mu Yangling didn't look at the three people kneeling on the ground, got up and said, "I don't know who chose Ji Kong, it's stupid." Ji Kong's face was blue and white, and a blood stain was drawn on his neck when he moved. He looked at Mu Yangling with abnormal resentment. Mo Wu and the others also looked very ugly. Obviously they had taken out Baiyun Temple and Jingshui Temple. At least they would not implicate the innocent monks in the temple, but Ji Kong and Yuan Fang ruined everything. Realizing the sadness in my heart, if I knew this earlier, I shouldn't have let Ji Kong and Dolly get so close back then, and they didn't even distinguish between closeness and closeness. Mu Yangling waved someone to take the three of them to the side room next door to guard them. Realization seemed to be 10 years older all of a sudden. He looked at Ji Chen and said, "Jing Chen, if you can get out alive, then you will be in charge of Baiyun Temple." "Uncle." Wu Wu waved his hand and said, "Your brother Ji Kong assassinated the princess. You will not survive anyway. You have to remember that you are the abbot of Baiyun Temple in Qianan, not Baiyun Temple in Nanjian." Jian knelt on the ground, weeping bitterly. "My nephew knows." Wu Wu sighed, "Don't make the same mistake as your senior brother. In the future, we will be farther away from Baiyun Temple in Nanjian. 200 years have passed, and one country has become two countries. Those who have broken the relationship. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 681. In the East Courtyard, the two sides confronted each other. In the room, Miss Wang's maid was persuaded in a low voice, "Miss Kaiouhui, the Rongjun Palace has sent pigeons to notify the foreign aid. I am afraid that the reinforcements will arrive before dawn. Besides, the Qingshui Temple has already arrived surrounded by the guards of the palace. We can't get away at all." Her eyes fell on the bed, and she said in a low voice, "Besides, His Highness is in urgent need of medicinal materials, otherwise, I'm afraid we won't be able to survive tonight." Kaiouhui looked at His Highness, who was burning red. Her eyes were red, she could only grit her teeth and nod. Jing Xian hurriedly said in a low voice, "Your Highness is now the daughter of Dali Youwei General Wang Ping. Girl, be careful." Jing Xian told her the most important things about her understanding, and then helped carry her out. Kaiouhui nodded slightly to the dark guard outside, and then the dark guard put down his sword and was tied up by Qi San. The atmosphere froze immediately. Kaiouhui followed Miss Wang step by step. Qi San glanced at her and did not stop her. The originally stagnant atmosphere eased up a bit. Except for Kaiouhui and a maid, Miss Wang and her party were able to get here alive. Only 3 hidden guards, and the 3 of them were very skilled. Qi San felt that among all the guards, only the commander of Bailey, who was next to the emperor, could fight them well. If they hadn't been injured this time, the guards' casualties wouldn't have been so light. Chi-san ordered the three of them to be guarded, and at the same time quietly ordered a guard to go down the mountain to report the news while the monk Wu and I was not paying attention. They have no carrier pigeons and no foreign aid. After dawn, Wu Wu and others must have guessed. Although the people who can make decisions in Baiyun Temple and Jingshui Temple have ordered them to detain them, it is safer to invite foreign aid. Otherwise, with so many people, they can't go down the mountain either. Mu Yangling stood in front of the bed and carefully looked at Miss Wang on the bed. She was 15 or 16 years old, with sad willow eyebrows, a small melon-seeded face, and a skin like white jade. She was a rare beauty. Seeing that her face was flushed red and her brows were tightly frowned, Mu Yangling asked the doctor who took her pulse, "How is it?" The doctor put away his hands, bowed and said, "The fever is too severe, she needs to cool down immediately, and I'll prescribe some medicine for her. If she can survive noon today, it will be fine." It was already early morning, and it was only 4 or 5 hours before noon. She waved him down to grab the medicine, and looked at the girl on the bed. Kyohwai didn't expect it to be so serious. She was kneeling in front of the bed and weeping. Mu Yangling raised her eyebrows, turned around and told Li Shun, "Go get well water to cool her down. The medicine has to be boiled for a while, so it is better to physically cool it down first." At this time, just after spring and summer, the well water on the mountain is extremely cool, without ice, and it is also very good to use it to cool down. Li Shun brought the water in. Kyohwai had already wiped away her tears, stepped forward to take the water basin, and said in a low voice, "Servant, come." But Li Chun saw that her movements were a bit unfamiliar, so he raised his eyebrows and left the matter to her. Mu Yangling sat by the bed, picked up Miss Wang's hand and touched it. Seeing Kyohwai twisting the handkerchief and looking at her strangely, Mu Yangling gently put her hand on the side of the bed, got up and said, "Take good care of her, tell Guyu if you need anything, and she will bring it to you." Kyohwai quickly nodded her head in response. Seeing that she was walking hurriedly, went up to pick up Miss Wang's hand to check, and felt relieved when she saw that there was nothing abnormal. Seeing that the girl's face was flushed, she quickly folded a towel and put it on her forehead to dissipate the heat. When Mu Yangling returned to his room, the little bear had fallen asleep again, but he was still a little uneasy. His two little hands were clenched into fists and placed next to his head. Sometimes he kicked his legs as if he was frightened, and his little brows frowned. Mu Yangling stepped forward to hold him in his arms, wrapped him in a blanket, and patted his back lightly. The little bear frowned slightly when he smelled the familiar smell, and arched in his mother's arms, feeling relieved fell asleep. Mu Yangling raised his head and asked Li Shun softly, "How is it? It's not like someone serving you personally. When you twisted the towel, the water splashed, and you put it on your forehead without wringing it dry. It looks like you haven't served anyone very well." Mu Yangling nodded slightly, thinking of Kyohwai's light but steady footsteps, knowing that she has kung fu skills. She used to be a martial maid, just like the martial maid next to Xiaoxiang. She only needs to be responsible for his safety, and can ignore everything else. Miss Wang's hands were soft and delicate, and looked like the hands of a young lady, but Mu Yangling still had some doubts in her heart. Was she really just Wang Ping's daughter? Mu Yangling lay with her son in his arms for a while, and it was dawn outside. Guyu came in lightly, and whispered a few words in Li Shun's ear. "Son, get up and walk out." Li Chun and Guyu rushed forward to serve. "Madam, Chi-san asks if you want to leave early. Have the reinforcements arrived?" "Not yet, Chi-san probably has to wait until the beginning of the morning, note, around 7 o'clock, Guyu whispered. Mu Yangling shook his head slightly and said, "We'll wait until the reinforcements arrive. We are too few and it's too dangerous on the road." "How is that, Miss Wang?" "The fever has subsided, but she has a wound on her waist and abdomen. The doctor said that the internal organs were injured and it is not suitable to move. At this time, she is still in a coma." We have to go, people must not stay here, go ask someone to prepare a sedan chair, and the carriage is bumpy, so use the sedan chair to carry her back. Isn't it too polite to her, Gu Yu muttered. Mu Yangling glared at her, and said, I always feel that her identity is wrong. The 3 hidden guards beside her were seriously injured and could withstand the attack of the 4 guards of the palace. Since a general's mansion can be taken with such strength, how could he only protect one woman to escape? Normally speaking, the first choice should be the youngest son of the family. Didn't it mean that she escaped unharmed by going out by chance? Who would bring so many hidden guards when going out? Mu Yangling said, if there were a group of such hidden guards in our house, even if we were in jail back then, they would still be able to rush in and rob Xiaobao and Xiaoxiang. For such a person, Brother Qi Heiran only has 100 miles. If he wants to train such an outstanding soldier, he depends not only on means and resources, but also on his background. Because of the martial arts family, the Zhu family has a lot of money and martial arts cheats, but that's it, there are only a few people like Bailey. If Qi Ziyuan was not too young to go to the battlefield, the Zhu family might not be willing to give Bailey driven by him. Such an outstanding dead soldier is not so easy to raise. Even though the Dali Wang family has a history of nearly 300 years, Mu Yangling still has some doubts in his heart. There are no less than 3 dead warriors with outstanding martial arts beside a daughter. Is the Dali Wang family really capable? You must know that their losses along the way were not small, otherwise Miss Wang would not have been seriously injured. Mu Yangling only calculated in her heart, and knew that there must be no less than 6 such dead men around her. 6, the limit that Zhu's family can raise with the strength of the whole family. Can one Wang's daughter have 6 by his side? How many of the eldest sons who can be the heirs are placed by his side? Why didn't he have the strength to escape? Mu Yangling chuckled, she is not a fool. The reborn wife is farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 682. Chi-san stood in front of the door, walking back and forth anxiously. A guard rushed up from the bottom of the mountain. He rushed up to meet him and asked, how is it? The guard took a deep breath and said, young Master Biao has personally led the troops. He has already gone up the mountain, and he will be there in 2/4 of an hour. Chi-san punched excitedly, and said happily, that's great. The monks of Baiyun Temple were stationed not far away, but he was always frightened, for fear that those people would lose control and rush over. Chi-san couldn't leave, so he turned around and told a guard, tell the news to the princess quickly. When Mu Yangling got the news, the corners of his mouth turned up slightly, and he felt relieved. He turned his head and told Li Shun, tell the maid to pack up. The queue outside the second gate is still on guard. Keep Wu Jiikeng and others under strict supervision. Mu Yangling turned around to look at Miss Wang, who was sleeping next door. Kyo Huai was sleeping on the bedside. When she heard the sound of footsteps, her body tensed up, and she jumped up and looked back guardedly. When she saw Mu Yangling, her expression eased slightly. But his eyes were still fixed on her. Mu Yangling didn't seem to notice her alertness, stepped forward and touched Miss Wang's forehead, nodded and said, the fever is gone. Thank you, princess, for giving me the medicine. Mu Yangling waved his hands and said with a smile, since I promised to treat her illness, I naturally did what I said, but her fever subsided, but her injuries were serious. The doctor said that his ability is limited, and there is not enough medicine on the mountain. Not many things. Kyo Huai gritted her teeth, and asked involuntarily, what does the princess mean? There is an imperial doctor in my residence, who is very skilled in medicine, and the general's residence also has a lot of medicinal materials. I have ordered someone to prepare a sedan chair. The carriage is too bumpy. Your girl is too injured to ride in the carriage. Fortunately, I have asked someone to make a bed in the sedan chair. At least it can reduce some bumps, and you can go and see what else needs to be added later. Your girl is weak, and you have to take care of her. Kyohwai breathed a sigh of relief, as long as she can stay with the girl. Niang Niang, Xiao Shizi has woken up and is looking for you. Gu came quickly. Mu Yangling nodded slightly to Kyohwai, and hurried over to look at his son. The little bear was sitting on the bed with his mouth pursed. He wanted to cry or not. When he saw his mother stretching out her hand to hug her, tears fell down, feeling so wronged. Incredible. Mu Yangling hurriedly stepped forward to hold him in his arms, wiped away his tears, and asked softly, "Why are you crying? Isn't mother here?" The little bear leaned against her chest obediently, sobbed twice, clutching her sleeves tightly with his little hands, and only looked at her aggrieved. Mu Yangling nodded his nose, dressed him himself, and coaxed him, "Little bear, let's go home after we get dressed, shall we?" Hearing that he was going home, little bear was happier. He stretched out his hand to ask his mother to dress him well, and then climbed out of bed and squatted on the ground to put on his shoes. When Fan Zijian rushed in, what he saw was little bear putting shoes on his feet with red eyes, and so many girls in the room were watching, and his face turned blue with anger, and said angrily, "How are you serving Xiao Shizi? What? Didn't you see Xiao Shizi wearing shoes?" Li Shun and the others were taken aback, looked at Mu Yangling who was standing aside, and stood with hands tied, not knowing whether to step forward to help or not. Since Xiaoshiza was 2 years old, he asked himself to wear clothes and shoes, and sometimes he would ask the princess or girls to help when he was lazy, and the princess also said that in the future, he would try to let Xiaoshiza do it himself. Little Xiong was also taken aback, and squatted down on the ground, staring blankly at Fan Zijian. The round-headed, round-brained child who looks very similar to Haoran has reddish eyes. It looks like he has been bullied and wronged. Fan Zijian's heart aches. He loves Xiao Xiong in the first place, but now Xiao Xia is pregnant again. It is a father's love when flooding. Seeing the little bear looking at him, he immediately softened his expression, stepped forward to hug the little bear, and said, "Little bear, who bullied you? Tell uncle, uncle will help you beat him." As he asked, he wanted to put on shoes for him. The child's feet were small and soft, and Fan Zijian couldn't get them in after wearing them for a while. In addition, the bear was not light, and he squatted again, and his forehead was sweating for a while. Knowing that he was not in good health, Mu Yangling hurriedly carried the little bear from his arms, took the shoes in his hand and put them on the little bear, explaining, "This kid is self-reliant, and now he doesn't like people to help him put on his shoes." Fan Zijian straightened up, and said dissatisfiedly, "It's not necessary to be self-reliant. How old is he? You are too strict." Mu Yangling felt that it would be better to go back and discuss this kind of education issue with Qi Heiran behind closed doors, so he nodded perfunctorily, and Fan Zijian knew that she hadn't listened, so he asked seriously, "Where is the Jingshui temple? What's going on?" The guard came back to report the letter, and he didn't say clearly, "The assassin was caught." Mu Yangling wanted to hand the little bear to Li Shun, but the little bear hugged his mother's neck tightly. Mu Yangling could only hug him and tell Fan Zijian what happened last night, saying, "I suspect that Miss Wang is not Wang Ping's daughter. She didn't bring an identity document. There must be something to prove her identity," Fan Zijian asked. Mu Yangling was stunned, and said, "If you don't tell me, I'd forget. I was too busy thinking that they were fleeing for their lives. It is impossible to bring these things. I will ask someone to ask later, but now the master is unconscious." "What is the truth?" "Ask when someone wakes up." Fan Zijian nodded, "How do you plan to arrange her?" "Let's put it in the general's mansion and keep it. As for the 3 dead men, leave them to you. Don't take their lives. Although they are fierce, their masters are in our hands. They should know what to do." Fan Zijian frowned slightly, "Didn't you say that Kyohwai is good at martial arts?" Mu Yangling smiled and said, "Don't worry, there are quite a few martial maids in my house." She can't beat four hands with two fists, and she has a seriously injured master to protect. She won't be ignorant, Mu Yangling lowered her voice. The voice said, besides, those three dead men seem to be following her orders. Fan Zijin frowned. Chi San said that Master Jingxin went directly into the house to persuade Kaiouhui. The two sides were still in confrontation, but Kaiouhui made the dead man give up resistance and was willing to be tied up, which shows that they listened to Kaiouhui. The reinforcements brought by Fan Zijin surrounded Baiyun Temple and Jingshui Temple. He left half of them to separate the monks and nuns in the temple, and then took half of them to escort Mu Yangling and the others back to the city. Wu Wu and others were all taken away by him, leaving Baiyun Temple and Jingshui Temple without a leader. Seeing that the monks and nuns were making a fuss, Fan Zijin appointed two senior monks and nuns to manage Baiyun Temple and Jingshui Temple respectively, and then took people to protect Mu Yangling and others down the mountain. Wu Wu knew that the sedan chair he found was to carry Ms. Wang, and the most important thing was stability, so he asked someone to directly lift out the largest sedan chair, covered it with a thick quilt, and Ms. Wang was gently placed on the chair by Kaiouhui. On it, she herself sat on one side and hugged her head and gently placed it on her knees, indicating that she could get up the sedan chair. The mountain road is bumpy, and the sedan chair is indeed much more stable than the horse-drawn carriage. In addition, the sedan chair is carried by four guards with strong martial arts. They start and land in unison. Kaiouhui let go of the heart she had been carrying all along.